It is Tuesday, July 14th, and this is the Groton Town Council Committee of the Whole regular meeting. Councilors present: Bordelon, Baumgartner, Franco, Heed, Melendez, Parker, and Zeppieri. And Councilor Aubry will be joining us shortly, I'm told. So we have a quorum. And calendar and communications. Mr. Burt, would you like to begin this evening?
Sure. I don't have much tonight other than I had forwarded an update on, there was a series of questions by Councilor Franco concerning COVID. I had had our Human Services and Economic Development provide answers to those questions. I've compiled them. I emailed it to the council. I've posted it on the town's website, and it will be made part of the minutes for this meeting so that people can read the update. It's fairly lengthy.
Thank you very much. So we will start with Councilor Baumgartner, please. Do you have communication, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councilor Parker, communications?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Franco, communications.
I've had many communications from residents in our town and discussions over knowing property. I'd like to thank Mr. Burt for replying with the answers to the questions regarding the COVID. And because it is so lengthy and there's so much to be discussed and a lot going on in our town, I would like to once again request that this come in front of the council so this can be a discussion, because there's a lot of issues that are going on and there may possibly be some things that the council can do to help our community. Thank you.
Councilor Heed.
Let's see, I have no communications, thank you. Oh, but I did want to follow up with Town Manager John Burt. He sent out the list of, well, he sent out his weekly report, and I just wanted to make sure that he got my response that I would like to see a bus for to run from Westside Middle School down to the Zeppieri house. Not sure if everybody else had responded to that either.
I did receive that email. I've not heard from anyone else. Part of the issue is we only have one driver available. We have probably, I think it's somewhere around 5 people that get medical transports. One we would have to do because I believe it's a cancer treatment. The others we'd have to work with to see if they could reschedule for another day.
All right, thank you, sir.
Councilor Aubry is not here yet, so we will go to Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you. I also received a lot of emails regarding the garden. I also attended a peaceful rally protest in Stonington for one of our residents here, Crystal Caldwell, and there's a lot of discussion, and was happy to speak in support of Crystal and her family. I also do think that we can find another way in reference to Councilor Heed's request for the transportation, which is something that I had brought up at the other meeting about making sure that District 2 does not have voters that are possibly being blocked out due to lack of transportation or adequate poll availability to be able to get there. Maybe there's another way. If it's not just that bus, maybe we should start to look at other things now. I understand that vehicle is used for medical, but I think we can also in the town find something else. Thank you.
Councilor Melendez.
Nothing to report.
Councilor Zeppieri.
I'm with Melendez.
Thank you. I've had numerous communications about many things. People talking to me about beaches and rail proposals, lots of things going on. Today I attended a ribbon cutting. We have 2 new businesses on Pearl Street, downtown Mystic, which is quite encouraging. One is an esthetician and the other is an athletic wear apparel shop. So that was encouraging to see 2 new businesses, as well as Mr. Young's shop going in where Bartleby's closed. So good things are happening in Mystic. That's great to hear. There are also 2 new programs from the state, and Mr. Burt is going to be posting the information on the town website, help for renters and help for mortgage holders. And there is a phone number to call, and there are certain requirements, and they're really trying to target the people that maybe are not qualifying for unemployment or did not meet another certain criteria, and these new programs are to help them directly. So that information will be posted on the town website. All right, we are on to approval of minutes. Councilor Baumgartner, would you like to move the minutes, please?
Yes, I would be happy to.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I had my rules agenda up.
Do you want me to go ahead?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the committee of the whole meeting minutes of, sorry, of June. Give me a second.
June 23.
Yes, the council of the whole committee, council of the whole meeting minutes of the 14th, so moved. I'm sorry, of the 23rd, June 23rd, so moved.
Is there a second on approval of the minutes?
Second.
Moved by Baumgartner and seconded by Zeppieri. We are looking at the minutes from the June 23rd meeting, or is there any discussion on the minutes? And there are no hands, so all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously, and we are at 8 councilors. Let me just double check. Yes. 8 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions. Minutes are moved. All right, the next item on the agenda, and Councilor Baumgartner, I'm going to come right back to you. This is new business, and this is 2024-77, review of police policies and establishment of a police civilian review board. And this was Councilor Baumgartner's referral. And that is the only item on the agenda tonight, so we could take our time with this and everybody will have a chance to discuss. So let's see. Councilor Baumgartner, did you want to say anything before we start? We have Attorney Duggan with us. We have Mr. Burt. Did you want to introduce anything before I turn the floor over to the attorney?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you actually to both you and the town manager for putting this on the agenda. As you know, as many councilors know, I made this referral shortly after the death of George Floyd. Obviously, the reaction to his death and police brutality in general has been immense. We've seen in our own community, hundreds of young people take to the streets, working with folks of all skin colors, ages, race and creed, challenging racism and as both systemic racism, as well as challenging bigotry. And so it's really been wonderful seeing the community come together. But again, this referral came out of also a recommendation from our former president, Obama, who implored councilors across the country to review their policing policies on the books. So our council is now taking those steps, heeding his call for action, and looking forward to hearing what our town, our town attorney has to say about how we can implement, a whole host of potential reforms. So I know I have a lot of questions myself, so I'll be spending a lot more time asking questions as opposed to saying, how I feel. So with that, I have nothing further to say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Baumgartner. Okay, so we will go to, I'm sorry, I neglected to say that Attorney Cody is here as well, and Chief Fusaro is also with us. So Attorney Duggan or Mr. Burt, did you want to say anything before we turn it over to the attorney?
No, just to point out, Councilor Aubrey did just join.
Oh, excellent. So we are at 9 counselors as of 6:41. Thank you. Welcome, Councilor Aubrey. All right, Attorney Duggan, would you like to begin? If you want to review the recommendations or the clarifications that you sent out to everybody, that would be great. Thank you. Attorney Duggan?
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Sure. So at the outset, I just referenced that the council and town manager did forward to us 5 specific questions regarding the creation of a subcommittee or a committee to provide some oversight to the council. We answered those questions, which also included in the last part, questions about, well, what types of committees could the council have, as a result of the legal opinions that we've shared. So I think, I think the answers to at least the first 3 questions were pretty clear in terms of what can a councilor subcommittee actually perform investigations of citizen complaints, and that answer was no. Can the councilor committee established by the council require an employee to appear before it? Again, the answer was no, and these are both based on some statutory criteria, case law, and the charter. And then, can a police commission be established as an oversight to the Groton Town Police under the existing town charter? The answer to that was no. It would require a charter change to be able to do that. I think 4 perhaps provided the point where you might have more sort of discussion, which was what duties could a subcommittee established by the council do in relation to the town police department? And as outlined over the first 3 questions, we indicated that the role of what we're calling as a civilian review board, but what I would just call simply as a board, a commission, a committee, is simply advisory in nature. And I probably simply wasn't the best word, but advisory in nature, meaning that this type of entity does not have the power to actually go ahead and actually conduct investigations or make policy changes by virtue of the opinion that we shared. Those things really are governed, again, by either statute, case law, or charter provisions already. But a subcommittee or committee certainly can have a significant role in addressing issues related to police matters. And those things include, again, perhaps reviewing investigatory materials after they're done, providing input or insight into hiring practices, meaning how to go forward and engage in diverse hiring practices, in a variety of other items. So I think, in terms of focus for the council, it's a reminder that, what you're looking at, if you wish to put together this type of board, is a board that will have an advisory role, and that it would be important to decide what are the things that you really want to have that advisory role regarding. Again, it wouldn't be actually conducting an investigation, might be reviewing an investigation, but I think you need to identify what the issues are that you see, and what issues an advisory committee could actually assist with, and then move forward in that capacity if it was deemed necessary.
Thank you. Did Mr. Cody wish to speak, or is he here in just a support capacity?
Did you want to share anything, Rich?
No, I think you covered it.
Yeah. And I apologize. I can't seem to, I'm not sure if I have video or not.
That's fine. We can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay.
So as far as the email that we received from the attorneys, if you look on page 6, it starts at the bottom of page 6. One of the first things it says is we should determine the purpose of the committee. And then it goes on to say we should assess what already exists. And then the last 2 are kind of in the weeds, which we need to do the first two things first, determine whether an independent committee or a subcommittee of the council is best, and then determine a membership selection process. So those are suggestions from the attorney. Councilor Baumgartner, I'm going to yield the floor to you first to see if you wanted to get the ball rolling, if you had something in particular that you wanted to propose this evening, or if you just wanted to have some questions answered by the attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did send the town manager a follow-up question, and thank you, Eileen, for your answer to those questions in the memo sent late last week. I know that I had sent John an email, I believe this morning, with an additional question, and I'd be happy to ask that, for purposes of transparency. I say that out loud now. So I asked if the council can, sorry, I'm a little slow today. So I asked John, can the town establish a civilian review board without violating the town charter? Because the town attorney had wrote that we cannot establish a police commission. And so I wasn't sure how the town attorney had sort of distinguished civilian review board from a police commission. Because then again, civilian review boards in my eye, police commissions, they sort of manage and administer police departments, whereas a civilian review board provides misconduct in the case that there is, oversight in the case that there is misconduct. So just wanted to clarify that. I hope I'm being clear. But maybe what the difference is between a police commission and a civilian review board, and I guess how you would view a civilian review board in terms of its function as an oversight entity as opposed to an administrative one, if that makes sense. So that was like a loaded question.
So Attorney Duggan, were able to hear Councilor Baumgartner's question?
I was, sure, and I'd be happy to answer that.
Thank you.
I think you just saw from the opinion as a police commission is a statutory creature. And that is the one place in the statutes that it sets out the ability to manage and really oversee, a police department. When you turn to something else, and although we're talking about, an entity that we call civilian review board, remember, other than in that legislation or the draft legislation that just came out, which is just a bill, there's no reference to a civilian review board in our statutes. If you look across the state, there are only still a few entities that actually have something called a, quote, civilian review board. And these things, with a possible exception that I saw of Hartford, which I honestly don't understand the anomaly, these are all advisory in nature, meaning, again, the things that we've talked about and that are laid out in the opinion. So from my perspective, you don't have to call it a civilian review board, police board. You could call it pretty much anything you might like. It's really a matter of what those duties are. And the duties have to be advisory in nature. So I myself got a little hung up, thinking about a specific, quote, civilian review board, because when I really looked into it, I'm like, well, this really, it's not a creature of statute. It's something that people kind of talk about, and you might find articles about it, but it's nothing that's actually defined. And even in the proposed legislation, there's no actual definition of what this type of entity would do. So again, I think when you look at that legislation, it's kind of thinking about really, what are you trying to achieve here? If the goal is to say, okay, again, we want more say in how the police go out and hire. We want to pursue more diverse hiring, or we want to, be able to take a look at investigations once they're done. And of course, there are all sorts of complications, in that as to how much you can look at, what you can see, what you can't see, what you can comment on. But it really depends on, I think, what it is you're looking to achieve. And as long as we're talking about something that's advisory in nature, that's much different from a statutorily based police commission.
So, and that's the real big question, you know, if like currently it may actually also be helpful to provide if someone can provide a rundown of the current process. So if there is an officer that is being accused of misconduct, right, what process would they currently go through to ensure that that, you know, obviously that the person is being, you know, that the officer being investigated is investigated thoroughly and, you know, but in you know, in a,
Sure.
you know, as straight. So what you argue is, you know, there's a lot of people that argue the police shouldn't be investigating themselves, right? That there should be an independent sort of voice ensuring that you know, that if there was misconduct, that ensuring that independent voice isn't weighed into the kind of the emotions of having, you know, if you work with a colleague, say, you know, somebody you enjoy working with, that person would, you know, be getting a fair trial, so to speak, right? So,
Sure.
yeah. So, what process is the current? What is the current process for?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak a little bit about that, and then I'll ask the chief to jump in as well. But at the beginning, if there's an issue where an officer is accused of some significant misconduct, that type of investigation goes to employees who are outside of the union, meaning the captain or the deputy chief. They'll investigate the matter. If there are potential criminal charges or criminal issues involved as well, there's a separate and parallel track that goes through, you know, with the state's attorney, et cetera, to review and address that. When the investigation is completed, it's run up sort of the flagpole, I'd say, through either the deputy chief and then to the chief. And frankly, if there's an issue of serious misconduct, oftentimes the chief or deputy will contact our office as well to review the materials, review the investigation, provide some insight as to really what should or can happen in this instance. One thing that I've found with working with police, not just here in Groton, but in many agencies in southeastern Connecticut, is that, well, it may be said, you know, police are investigating police. Police actually know police, meaning there are strict rules of conduct that police officers must follow and that are laid out in the town's policies. For example, police officers, frankly, and investigators in that nature are really best served in terms of determining whether or not there have been violations of those particular items or not. Our office, again, serves as another check along the way. If there is misconduct found, an employee is issued what's called a pre-disciplinary notice. If it's serious misconduct, where they're notified that the town may be taking discipline against them from whether it's a suspension or separation from employment. That's a whole other process that then starts, where the employee has the opportunity to respond again to the charges that have been made, and then the town makes a decision as to whether or not and to what level to issue discipline. It's a pretty carefully constructed process, and if you look at the civilian complaint process that is mandated by the state in which the town has likewise adopted, you'll see in that there are very specific steps that have to be taken when investigating those types of matters. There's really not a lot of wiggle room, so to speak. And, you know, I can say, you know, and certainly in my experiences with the town and most recently with this administration, you know, I've not come across something where it's been like, wait a minute, why is this happening or that happening? We certainly have discussions about, is this the right charge? Is this the most serious charge, or et cetera? But not an issue, Councilor Baumgarten, of perhaps what you were alluding to. So, Chief, would you like to comment? I'm sorry.
Chief Fusaro, thank you for joining us this evening, sir. And I hope everyone appreciates you taking the time to be here with us. Did you want to add anything to what Attorney Duggan had to say?
No, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having me. I also have Deputy Chief Gately in the office with me here, too. I think she succinctly captured that. When we have an allegation of misconduct, or if we have a complaint against personnel, I think I articulated to you last time, we handle those seriously. If anything, we categorize those, meaning any types of complaint that comes in, we give it a tracking number, even if they're anonymous or even if there's not necessarily a lot of information to it. We do track those. But the process is as she described it. We do have folks here in the department, primarily the deputy chief and the captain, who handle those investigations. There are a lot of procedures that they have to go through to do this. We send them to training on internal affairs investigations. If there is a potential conflict, or we feel that there needs to be some guidance from an outside source, usually we'll go to the state's attorney's office, particularly if those are matters that could result in criminal charges. We are obligated to inform them and utilize their services. So at times I've asked for and received assistance from the state's attorney's office in the form of investigators from their office, but also we've referred things out to other agencies in order to maintain that sense of fairness and making sure that if there's any conflict of interest that we avoid that from the outset. But again, I think Attorney Duggan explained the process. There is some complexities that go along with it, understanding the collective bargaining agreement, existing law, policy, and procedure for the department, but also a lot of the labor things where we utilize the services of Attorney Duggan and her colleagues to look at, labor and employment issues, things that we may be need some legal guidance on. But again, we don't do this in a vacuum. Our officers understand that, if there's an allegation of serious misconduct or any misconduct for that matter, it will be investigated and the chips will fall where they may.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Baumgartner, are you set for this round? We have 3 other councilors.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of other councilors who would like to speak.
Okay. So we have councilors Heed, Bordelon, and Zeppieri. And I would just ask that you keep in mind when you're speaking that there are 9 of us here that all want to ask questions. And if you can just try to be patient with each other as we're asking questions and respect each other's time and energy. Councilor Heed, you have the floor first, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to point out, before I was on the town council, I was on the city council. And before that, I was just a resident. And then I'm not even from Groton originally. But that being said, the city recently put together something called the Pact. And it's like a joint committee with different people involved, citizens at large. I think the city police is involved in it. I'm not sure if councilors are on it or not, but I did hear from one of the members of that pact, and she said that one of the city residents said, and this is something that I often heard when I was on city council, is that the city residents like their city police because they trust them, they know them, and they have some sort of a distrust with the town police. And I'm saying that not to impugn the town police in any way. I'm just saying that's what's out there. But before I was even a city councilor, I had a roommate who had an issue with the city police. And now that I'm a town councilor, I hear from city residents who don't like the city police, but they trust the town police. And it's just funny how all this spins around. And I think whatever we end up doing, it should be something that works cooperatively with the community and with the police to improve that trust and sort of expose people to the process, make sure that there's a little bit of but a little bit more oversight and interaction, maybe a little more interaction in the form of like a video on what you do when you get pulled over by the police, or like the city does the city day where the police are out there with the city council and they're doing a barbecue. So maybe the town council could do something like that for the town residents. But those are ideas that I think could run through some kind of a committee that did oversight and generated ideas, and it could be cooperative either with us or with the RTM or something like that. But I think whatever we want to accomplish, it should be a positive for everybody that's involved, and not be viewed as, you know, we're looking to rein somebody in. You know, we're the community. We want our community to be well represented. So maybe that would be a good place to start.
I would just urge everyone to keep the premise in mind that we're trying to improve everything for the whole town. And it serves us well when we look at equity and how we're talking about, we're in a unique circumstance. We have 3 police departments, right? Very unique. Please keep in mind, we want to be equitable and treat all 3 departments fairly, and we want to talk about them fairly. So please just keep that in mind as we're having our discussion this evening. And I'm sure Councilor Heed meant no disrespect to the town or the city police or the Groton Long Point police.
Oh, absolutely not. I'm just putting it out there that some people have trust issues. So that might be what we can attempt to.
Thank you for clarifying, Councilor Heed. So we have Councilor Bordelon, and then Zeppieri, and then Councilor Franco.
Thank you. I just want to say that, you know, after reading the proposed draft ordinance that was sent to us by John, looks like also stated that Councilor Heed had sent in some recommendations on that. And then I think like about 20 or 30 minutes ago, they wanted to strike a couple lines in that as well. Striking line, 1 member from the Groton faith-based community, and I'm assuming that 7G is what you were trying to say instead of 5G. I just wanted clarification on that. That's
yes.
what you wanted was 7.
Yeah, I did follow. I sent a follow-up email.
Okay, so further duties included in Connecticut general statutes. I just think that it's a little too early to even start really proposing. I think it's a great idea. I think there's some good stuff in here. I think it's more important that we move towards having the discussion and looking at how a committee should be formed and having full deliberation on that. The legislation is about 65 pages. It's pretty extensive, and that proposed. I would actually like to make a motion. I hereby move to establish a joint town council and RTM committee for the purpose of reviewing and drafting an ordinance to create some form of a board, civilian review board, or something based on the town attorney's opinion, the town manager's draft motion, the 65-page proposed Connecticut police reform bill, other municipalities, and states' best practices, along with the public comment and input from Groton town residents. I think it's really important. I feel like the missing piece.
1 minute, please. Is there a second to Councilor Bordelon's motion?
Second.
I think the missing piece Councilor Bordelon, can you hold on 1 second? We don't have the clerk with us tonight to record.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry.
I'm going to ask you if you could summarize that, please. I'll try to jot it down. Mr. Byrd, if you would also try to jot it down, please.
Yep. Okay. So I hereby move to establish a joint town council and RTM committee for the purpose of reviewing and drafting an ordinance to create some form of civilian review board, or whatever we decide to call it, based on the town attorney's opinion, the town manager's draft motion, the 65-page proposed Connecticut police reform bill, other municipalities and states' best practices, along with public comment and input from Groton town residents.
Okay, can I read back and you tell me if I've got everything, please?
Sure.
All right, so this was moved by Bordelon and seconded by Franco to establish a joint town council and RTM committee for the purpose of reviewing and drafting an ordinance that would create a board based on the town attorney's work, the draft motion from the manager, the 65-page proposed bill from the Connecticut General Assembly, other municipalities, I'm sorry, I'm trying to write real fast, and best practices as advised by citizen input?
That should do it.
Okay. All right, so that's been moved and seconded. Mr. Burt, do you have everything you need on that? Because I'm going to turn the floor back to Councilor Bordelon so she could expand.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Bordelon, you have the floor.
I mean, it was brought to my attention that I believe the town manager and mayor were approached by the moderator to create a joint committee first before bringing it to the RTM. First, it wasn't really brought to us initially at all to even ask, and it was kind of said not to way before. So I have some concerns with that. That's one piece. But I think it's really important that we include the RTM because they truly represent the whole town and each individual district. And I think it's important to look at all of this and not, the draft motion has some great ideas in it. I think that tonight, one cannot make a decision on something like this. I think this is a very important issue and topic. And I think if we rush this process tonight, we could end up with something that really doesn't work well and will not do the town any justice and will not support the outcry for what people need in our community. Looking at this, I think in the proposed draft ordinance, I think once again, there are some great things in here, but I do think a full deliberation needs to happen and having community input and really go over the language and pick apart the charter to its extent, along with the attorney's opinions and kind of correspond with them back and forth and really come together with a real solid idea of what one could look like and what we could put forward that would support all the ideas of the town. But I do think it's important to make sure that the RTM and community comments are a part of this process. Thank you.
Councilor Zeppieri and then Franco.
Going back before this, the motion was made, we were discussing the different ways of reviewing complaints about police misconduct. Could I ask Chief Fusaro to talk about post 5? That's a state statute that requires that that division, I believe, of the state police investigate any and all police misconduct. Am I correct?
Are you discussing the new legislation? Is that Councilor Zeppieri? Is that what you're referring to?
No, well, it's in the new legislation packet, but there's strong implications that it already existed.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is if there's a significant use of force currently under statute, should there be an officer-involved shooting or in custody death, that's referred to the state's attorney's office, whereby the local state's attorney's office doesn't investigate it, they refer it out to another. As I read the current legislation, they're looking at establishing an inspector general's office within the chief state's attorney's office that could handle those duties and I think an expanded amount of duties, but that's in the proposed legislation that I've read.
Thank you. I'm concerned about our attempt to manage the police department. I think the police are very highly trained. They do special work. They're in repeated training exercises. And I don't think there's enough sophistication among the general population to judge what the police have done and should do. If you're going to find a civilian board, I think you should have at least the chief of police on it to advise the advisory board as to what the police procedures are, and probably 2 patrol officers so that they can give some input into the board. The advisory board would have an advantage of creating some transparency, but I think the police have a good system for correcting egregious acts within their own ranks, and I think we should be deferential to that and allow that process to continue. To point out that in the last 10 years, there have been 21 police shootings resulting in death in Connecticut, and at least, unfortunately, 7 in the last year, but that may have something to do with the economic desperation of some of our citizens. In any case, almost all of those are justifiable shootings with people brandishing lethal weapons at the police. As we look at these things, we should look at, in statistics that I've been able to find in 2018, there were 58,000 assaults on police officers, 18,000 of which led to significant injury. That's nationwide. In the country this year, there have been, every year, by the way, there are about 50 shootings of police officers resulting in death. And there are additional cases where there are vehicular assaults where people try to run down a police officer. If we look at some of the statistics about police-related shootings of civilians, for the year 2020, there have been 204 white people shot by the police, 105 African Americans shot by the police, 66 Hispanic people shot by the police, and 15 other shot by the police, and 116 unknown races of people shot by the police. It seems like a pretty broad spectrum, and they're not singling out any particular bias in who they shoot. And the shootings are largely, almost entirely, based upon people brandishing weapons. We get a lot of coverage of the folks that seem to be getting that have been injured unnecessarily, but there are precious few. I think that the current system is working. I'm willing to support an idea to get an advisory board, but I think a couple of things. One is we should consider the morale of our police department. They are the forces between us and evil in our country. And while most of our people are truly wonderful, good people, there still are an awful lot of people who are not. And you look at the homicides, the rapes, the robberies, the burglaries in the United States, and they're far, far greater than all of Western Europe. There are very few countries that have a higher murder rate than we do. And the police are out there protecting us from that kind of harm. And I think that we ought to respect them for it and thank them for it. I'm concerned about trying to second guess police officers. I think that the system has a way to deal with folks who don't behave well. And there's no indication in Groton especially, and in Connecticut generally, that there is widespread police abuse. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zeppieri. We have Franco Granatowski and Bordelon in the queue.
Thank you. Ms. Duggan, can you tell me if we put together a committee, would this also oversee Groton, Long Point, and the city?
No, it would not.
And there's nothing that we could do to have it oversee them?
Nothing within, I think, the town's direct powers, or sole powers that it could do to have that happen.
So this would just impact the town of Groton, not Groton, Long Point, nor the city, whatever type of motion that we would pass, if we passed any, which I find to take issue with having the motion on the floor. I'd like to make an amendment and add, if such committee is necessary, because I don't think this should be an committee that, unless we decide tonight that we absolutely want this kind of committee, I think they should investigate and decide if our town needs this committee, and they would find if it is necessary. So with everything else that Councilor Bordelon had said. And with that, I would also like to add that anybody who's on the committee be residents that live in the town of Groton, not Groton Long Point, nor the city of Groton.
Councilor Franco, can you clarify your amendment, please?
I would like to make an amendment adding, if such committee is necessary, and those living in the town of Groton will be allowed on the committee. And also the police chief, deputy sergeant, or police officers will also be welcomed from the town of Groton.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat back, okay? Oh, yeah, and then I'll call for a second. So the amendment is, as Councilor Bordelon had originally proposed, adding in, if the committee is deemed necessary, it should be open to only those living in the town of Groton. And you also want the chief, the deputy, and I didn't catch the last part.
To add the police chief, deputies, sergeants, and officers from the town of Groton are also welcome to join the committee.
Okay, hold on one second, please. All right, one more time, I'll read it to you.
Mm-hmm.
If the committee, the amendment is, if the committee is necessary, only those living in the town of Groton would be the members. And the chief, the deputy, sergeants, and officers from the town are also welcome to attend or be part of, or what's
be part of the committee.
Welcome to be part of the committee. Okay, did the council hear that, or do you need me to read it again? Are we good? I need a second, please.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, so the amendment was moved by Franco and seconded by Bordelon. Okay, just so everybody's clear, I'm just going to restate so that the people watching at home kind of know where we are on this. There's been a motion put on the floor to form a kind of a task force or a joint committee of town council and RTM members to draft an ordinance creating a board. And the members of that board would be limited to residents of the town of Groton, and the administrative layer of the town police department would also be part of the committee. So that's a real brief summary of everything that was in the motion and the amendment for the people that are listening at home. Okay, Councilor Franco, did you wish to speak to your amendment before I go to more councilors?
I would like to note that if people are making decisions on such a committee, they should be the people who live in the town and are getting the services from the town police. Although you may be a Groton or resident living in the city or Groton Long Point, you don't get the services from the town police, and you should not be the ones making decisions for their department. So that's why I wanted to add that amendment to Councilor Bordelon's motion. I am in favor of transparency, and I would think the more voices in a larger committee and bringing in different viewpoints might be able to decide what our town should or should not have, than just us doing this ourselves and without any other. I mean, we have Chief Fusaro here, but we don't have police officers, and we don't know exactly what they go through on a daily basis and what they see and how decisions that are made would impact them as well. So I would like to include them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm next in the queue. There's so much on the floor right now, but I just want to say that I agree that this should be something that's explored, that we should have, I think, counselors, a group of counselors that would work on this and come up with a plan to present back to the council to decide whether we want to pursue something like this. But I think it should be council members that are doing that. The question, I have a question, then I have a follow-up comment. The question is, should this be an ordinance? And that's a question for the attorney. If you could tell us whether we need an ordinance, whether it's preferable to have an ordinance to create a committee. It seems like it would be simpler to just simply have the council has the ability to create a committee, an ABC. It seems like it would be simpler for the council to meet, decide what we want to do. That small group of councilors bring it back to the full council. The full council then can debate, tweak if we need to, and then vote on that and simply create the commission, the board, whatever you want to call it. It seems like that would be the simple way to go with this. And the last thing I'll say, then I'll shut up so the attorney can talk, is that I would prefer to see, rather than limiting the membership to just town residents, I would like to invite the city and Groton Long Point to join with us. And I would like to extend that hand and say, would you like to come and sit with us? And can we all work together on this? And if that's the case, if they're going to come and sit with us and be part of this to make, to have this discussion and make these decisions, then I think it should be everybody in the whole town working together. So I would say we should extend that hand first. And then if the subdivisions choose not to participate, if they're, they may be doing their own thing, then we go in and we limit, who we're going to include, simply because it doesn't make sense to, to be trying to push things out if they're not interested in receiving it. But I really do feel like we should extend first and ask if they are interested in joining us. I think that would be the best way to start with this if we truly want to make the whole community a better place, and we don't want to drive wedges between departments and between residents of one part of town and another part of town. Okay, so Attorney Duggan, is the best way to do this an ordinance, or can we simply do it as the council creates a board or a commission?
I agree that there's not a need to have an ordinance in this instance, that, by the charter provisions, you can simply create a commission. The council can do that. I just note as well in talking about that the draft legislation that does talk about civilian review boards references an ordinance. Now, again, I'd say that that's separate. We really don't even know what that entails right now. But by virtue of the fact that the legislation or draft legislation is out there, the council may also want to simply consider the fact that there is something pending. And we mentioned this in our opinion as well, just to say, if there are changes in state and federal law that are coming down or potentially coming down, timing may be everything, and you may want to just keep abreast of that before you go and make one move and it turns out, oh, gee, what we wanted to do now should be another move. But at its core, at its simplest, in terms of if there's a desire to move this forward, yes, the council can simply create a committee or a commission or board.
So just to follow up really quickly, are you suggesting then that because the General Assembly has a bill pending and we don't know what that bill is going to look like, perhaps we should just form a commission, and then once the General Assembly's work is done, come back in and then pass the ordinance that fits with what the General Assembly has done?
Well, we really don't even know what the General Assembly is going to do, because this is just a bill out of the Judiciary Committee. Their talk about an ordinance, we're not sure what it might be in the end, but I think it's just something to be cognizant of, that as you go forward, just obviously continue to monitor to this to see if it has any impact on what you would like this committee to do.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let me add to the queue here. So we have Bordelon, Parker, Heed, and Baumgartner.
Councilor Baumgartner was before me. I was the last one to raise.
That's fine.
Did you say me, or was there any?
Yes, Councilor Bordelon.
Okay, thank you. I can support the mayor's suggestion on extending our hand to all three departments first. Did you make it an amendment to that, Mayor Rentowski?
No, I just threw it out there for discussion purposes.
Yeah, I think I could support that. And I think that, forming something now and working on the process to move forward, we can wait. Nothing may ever happen. If we wait for anything, then we don't. How do you have change? So I think moving forward, if we create this committee and it becomes an ordinance at some point, or the draft from the state comes down, or we can choose to move something forward and meet again, reenact that same committee to relook at the state's ordinance and recreate something after. But I think the goal is to push something forward now and start working on all the details with it, because it is going to take some time. I can support, having, obviously officers, police involved to form this. What I'm proposing here is just establishing a group to have the platform to discuss this, but also I feel that the RTM should be a part of this. They have a safety committee, and that part I feel strongly about. I think it's important to have some members represented from there also. So I would be willing to make an amendment to add in, extending the offer to the city in Groton Long Point for, a right of refusal. I mean, if they don't want to be a part of it, obviously they don't have to.
So are you making an official amendment to invite the city in Groton Long Point to join?
Absolutely, yes.
And I will second that.
And I think that would allow at least, I know with the plastic ordinance, there was talk, well, they didn't get offered, and then we had to move forward. And I think that ordinance could have been much stronger with having at least more involvement on that end. So this opens it up, and at least, we extend the hand.
Okay, so when it comes time to vote, we're going to have an issue because there are conflicting amendments, right? But I'm going to let people continue to discuss at this point, and when it's time for a vote, we're going to have to clean things up. As long as everybody's following where we are with this, and that if we're inviting certain groups in, then it's going to preclude other amendments. So we'll have to tidy things up before we vote on anything tonight. So let's see. We have Councilor Parker, Baumgardner, and Heed, I believe, and then Franco. Go ahead.
No, I was just looking at the ordinance part of it, but if we're waiting to ask the city and the Groton Long Point to be involved, I'll yield to that. But I believe when we do ordinances, the town council sets it up and then it's forwarded to the RTM for them to vote on upon a 2/3 vote before they can veto it or accept it. So we still have to follow the process that's in our charter, that we set up the ordinance, and then it's forwarded on to the RTM, which is page 10 of our town charter. So I think we just need to make sure we're sticking to what we have written before we end up in a conundrum. That's all. Thank you.
Point of clarification.
Yes, Councilor Bordelon.
I just wanted to check, per the charter, I understand the process that it goes to the RTM, but I was just wondering, is there nothing stating that they couldn't be part of the joint committee to make the decision, or am I reading that wrong? Just to be a part of the discussion to build a draft.
The council on page 8 of section 5.5 of the ordinances, the council should have the power to enact, amend, or repeal ordinances not inconsistent with the charter or preempted by the Connecticut general statutes. We set it up and it gets forwarded on to the RTM, which is page 8, 9, and 10 of our town charter.
I would just add to that. I think I understand what Councilor Bordelon is asking. Correct me if I'm wrong. The town council is the legislative body of the town. We make the ordinances. Councilor Parker is simply stating that those ordinances then get passed to the RTM for final approval. I believe Councilor Bordelon is asking if we would like to include RTM members in our legislative process. Is that what you're asking, Councilor Bordelon?
Yes, I am. The way that I'm reading the charter is that it doesn't limit our ability to welcome them in the process and writing it. They do have a safety committee, and I think that they could be properly served, and they do represent the all the districts in the town.
And that's going to be a choice that the council is going to have to make. I believe that the town council is the legislative body, and as such, we should hold that responsibility. But that is something that the council will vote on. Councilor Parker, are you done, or do you have other comments?
That was it.
Okay.
One more thing for point of clarification, so that I just want to write my notes here. The RTM could be part of the process. It's just we'd have to vote on it.
We would have to vote on it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So we have now Councilors Heed, Baumgardner, and Franco.
Excuse me.
Baumgardner, Heed, and Franco.
I'm sorry. Councilor Aubrey?
I don't have a thing to put your hand up, but when it's an opportune time, I would like to offer something.
All right, we'll get to you next, Councilor. Councilor Heed?
No, it's Councilor Baumgartner first, please.
You just want me to have to retype everything. Okay, Councilor Baumgartner.
I haven't spoken on this amended motion yet, so if Councilor Aubrey wants to say something,
No, please, go ahead.
So, so I appreciate everyone's interest in obviously, supporting something that the town can vote on, but I think we need to slow down things quite a little bit. We're talking a lot about committees. We don't know what a committee will look like, what responsibilities will be vested with such a committee. In New London, they currently have a police community relations committee, and the mayor formed a working group to study whether or not that committee should function in the way that it has in the past, because so many people have asked that police community relations committee becomes a civilian review board. So there are even surrounding municipalities that are discussing whether or not they want to replace their existing committee with a new committee. So I think we're having this discussion because we're new to this and we haven't had any sort of committee that has had whether it's oversight or in an advisory capacity, have a committee that deals directly with the police department and its conduct. So this is new territory for all of us. And so, one thing I've talked about to several councilors in emails and over the phone is whether or not we need a task force to discuss whether or not we need a civilian review board. I think, as many have mentioned tonight, the state legislature will be adopting a series of reforms that will ultimately, impact our police department. One of which could be whether or not our municipality should have or will have a civilian review board. So I think what we should be having the discussion is what can be done to ensure that if the state does not either mandate or allow for the establishment of a civilian review board, what due diligence are we doing on our part to ensure that when that happens, that it is a seamless transition, right? So that's maybe one question / statement I have is, what can we do to best prepare for the legislation that is, because it will ultimately change once it goes through the committee and the rest of the legislature. But, that legislation offers a framework. What are we doing to ensure that if that structure or framework is established, what are we doing to ensure that the town will have can make that seamless transition? And no one really has to answer that. My second question or statement is working with the city and the borough. What legally can we do to ensure that there is some level of cooperation between the civilians as well as the police departments? Maybe talk about issues of uniformity and improving uniformity. But yeah, those are all great points. So my last point is, I think the vehicle we should use as a committee to assess whether or not we need a civilian review board, among other, in addition to reviewing other police policies, it's not just a civilian review board. There's a lot of discussion, as we talked about in the last council meeting with the police chief, as they're reviewing their policies and procedures, reviewing whether or not certain policies should be on the books, chokeholds, body cams. Obviously, we have those in place, right? We have those best practices, and we should continue following those. But do we have a vehicle to review those policies, or to have a much deeper discussion like we're having tonight? Again, we're not afforded to have a discussion where we can really dive deep into an issue. because we always have 1,001 things on the agenda. So we're talking about creating a committee to give this item, the focus that it deserves. So one thing I've shared with the mayor and many others on councilors is about establishing our public safety committee. Last year, it was last spring, 2019, we dissolved it. I believe Rich Moravasic, my predecessor, he was the chair of that committee, and they were reviewing other issues relating to, I think, the ambulance service. But perhaps we can utilize the Public Safety Committee to review, policing policy changes, recommend policies or ordinances, because we're talking about, do we do an ordinance? Do we not do an ordinance? So I think those discussions are just all too premature. Let's maybe focus those discussions in a much smaller deliberative body of interested counselors that can then make a recommendation to the committee of the whole, which would adopt any form of big change anyway. So and nothing would preclude that body of focused counselors from working with outside agencies, the RTM, NAACP, the police department, getting outside experts in weighing and police officers weighing in on issues that, because we don't have that system right now. So that's my suggestion. Instead of creating a task force that would explore whether or not to create another committee, I just think the more we can get out of the committee creating business, the better, especially if we're just looking to change policy. So. Okay, before you go away from the mic, so are you making a motion? We have like one main motion and two amendments. So I'm just curious if you are making another amendment, or if I'm not making an amendment. I actually, and respectfully to Councilor Bordelon, I understand where she's coming from. I understand her intent, but I think I would prefer we actually don't do anything tonight. And largely because I think within the Rules Committee and more generally this council can simply reestablish a public safety committee that could work on these issues in the short and medium and long term. And I think ultimately very soon, the first recommendations that should come out of that would be to create a civilian review board, which is precisely what we need to and ultimately the state legislation is calling for civilian review boards with subpoena power. So I think at the very least, having this body in place to assess the need for a civilian review board and how we can create that in a legally permissible way that doesn't violate the town charter. Okay, what I want to do. No, I'm not putting that into an emotion. What I want to do is I want to give Councilor Aubry and Councilor Melendez the floor because we have lots of second-time, third-time counselors. So I'm going to let those two speak first, then I'm going to ask a big question. So Councilor Aubry and then Councilor Melendez, I'll yield the floor to you after Councilor Aubry.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I don't want to do anything that would undermine our police department, affect their morale, or have them feel that we don't think that they're basically doing a very good job. I understand Councilor Bordelon's concerns, and I respect that. But I think that what Andre was saying is probably appropriate. Go back to our Public Safety Committee and recreate that and then go from there. I think this is important to all of us. But the thing is that overall, we have an excellent police force. We need to support them. And we don't need to create a problem that isn't there. I've talked to a lot of people trying to find out if there was something that they felt upset about or they were concerned about. And I'm not finding that in the general public at all in Groton. They're feeling very good with the way things are handled. So I have two concerns. I want to do what's right in Councilor Bordelon's division, we'll say, and I want to do what's right for the police. So I think we should do this a little slower, go with a suggestion that we go back to our Public Safety Committee and work forward from there. And I think in the course of doing that, the more that we see the police chief And the more that we have interaction with the police force, and the more that we learn about what they're doing, will make people feel much more content in this town. So I just want to do this very cautiously. I don't want to hurt anybody. And as I say, the thing that's very important to me is the morale of the police force. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Roby. I'm going to yield to Councilor Melendez if he would like to speak. Councilor Melendez, did you wish to speak to anything?
Yeah, I sort of just have a question perhaps for the town manager. I guess just hearing from everybody speak, there doesn't seem to be consensus to make a committee tonight. So does the manager have any recommendations or at least sort of distinctions between a task force and just a public safety subcommittee of the council?
Mr. Burt?
I don't really have a preference. I do think it's good to wait to see what the state legislature says. You hate to, which should be the next month or so. So, but whatever vehicle it is that looks at the need for the committee and then the process, I think is fine, whatever the council wants.
Okay. Yeah. I actually think it'd be a better idea, honestly, to wait if there's legislation up in the state, because we could make something now and then, you know, the powers of things that we can do change, and then we're going to want to come back and change it. So I think when we do it, we should just do it right. So I think personally, we could just probably, in the most simple way, reestablish the public safety subcommittee, and then they can decide there whether or not they want a if the task force is the best way to go forward. If they believe that, then we could do that. I think the subcommittee is probably the simplest and most efficient way to do this.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Melendez. So I have Councilors Heed, Franco, Moderator Eben wishes to speak, and Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple things. We don't have to wait for the new rules to come out. Actually, the mayor could establish an ad hoc public safety committee until the new rules come out, or we can make a motion to do it either way. Just wanted to throw that out there. Also, I think it would be good to include, if we go down the road of having task force, having other people from around the town, not just limited to town residents under the town police. Because I think if you go back to the trust issue and the building community, different ideas like that, you'd want to include more people, not fewer. But that being said, I did ask the town manager today. I know this was going to be an open discussion and probably nothing would be decided tonight, but I did ask him to come up with a draft of what we might be able to do just as a point of reference for us. So as we're looking forward at things that we can do and we want to do this, the ordinance that he drafted for us is, just kind of an outline of what we could do. And one thing that would be different between establishing a committee versus doing a task force is if you have a task force, how many people are on it? If you end up with 200 people, it ends up, a few weeks down the road, it ends up being like 70 people, then it's 50 people. It starts to fade out. Whereas if you have a certain number from certain areas right off the bat, it might be easier. But that being said, I'm kind of leaning in the direction of Councilor Baumgartner and just keeping tonight an open meeting to discuss ideas and maybe kick it back to the council public safety committee. Thank you.
Councilor Franco, Moderator Eben, and then Councilor Bordelon.
So I'll bring up the topic once again. We have a Groton Long Point Police, we have a city police, and we have the town police. Majority of our council is served by a different department than the town police. So we're making decisions and they don't even affect majority of this council. So this is why I'm trying to say, you have your own police department that you can go to and say what you want from your police department. And I don't think people from other areas of town should go and discuss and tell another police department outside of where they live that serves them and tell them how they should change when they don't even get these services. That's why I'm saying that it should be members that are town residents, not for Groton Long Point or not for the city. And it is nice to say, let's bring them all in together and try and get this kumbaya community committee or task force, or however you want to put it, and bring them all together. But I have seen in the past where we have actually passed an ordinance where the city said they were going to follow suit and they did not. And many residents were very upset by that because they thought it should have been the whole of Groton. And the city decided it wasn't right for them. So I'm just saying, think about this for a minute. You are going to be making rules for a department which isn't served by you. They don't serve you, and you get no services from them. So I honestly think that you should literally think about this very carefully, about having people who live in the city making decisions for the town police department, or, you know, when they have their own police department that they can go to and say, these are the changes I want from my own department. So I want you to really think about this and then make decisions based on that. And is there anything, Ms. Dugan, that can exempt people that are maybe from Groton Long Point and from the city for making decisions on the town police department? I can't hear you, you're muted.
Attorney Duggan, Councilor Franco had a question for you, please.
I apologize. I missed the last part of that. The question.
Is there anything that I wanted to make it so that the town residents make the decision for the town police department and not people from the city nor Groton Long Point. Is there anything that precludes me from being able to do that?
I'm not aware of anything that precludes the council from incorporating that into either a commission or incorporates it into, if you wound up with an ordinance, something like that. No, I don't think that there's anything that, quote, precludes it.
Thank you.
Is that all, Councilor Franco?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should have a committee decide whether we need to have an oversight committee. And I don't think that this council should be the one to decide. And I think it should be town people to decide, the town police department with a group of people, and they should decide and then come and give us their recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, we have Moderator Evan. You wish to speak, Moderator Evan?
Thank you, Mayor Granatowski. Yes, and thank you for allowing me to speak. And I actually had something else I wanted to say, but I just need to respond to Councilor Franco's comments that people who live in the city are apparently not residents of the town. I'm actually an elected town official. I pay taxes to the town. If my kids were to go to school at the new middle school, they would be covered by the town police. I go to the library, which is in the town, and I use town services. And at all those points in time, I'm protected by the town police. So I just can't imagine that there needs to be this type of odd division between the people who actually arguably pay the most taxes in the town to the town, not being able to be on this commission. But that's just me. That did get my dander up, I have to admit. But what I wanted to speak to was Councilor Bordelon's motion about this committee. And I just wanted to say that I understand that the town council's role is to legislate. What I see the RTM as doing is having a diverse number of insights. The RTM, unlike the town council, has both Republicans and Democrats, and unlike the town council, we have representation from all 7 districts in proportion to the population. So there are a lot of benefits to including the RTM in such a committee or task force or whatever it is called to discuss the formation of whatever that is called. It's a little like a Dr. Seuss person watching the Watchers. But, I just want to say that there's a strength in the RTM. It can be used for positive good. At the last meeting, I did set up a special committee to do fact finding to contribute to this effort. I hope that their effort will contribute to this, and I hope that some of the members of the RTM will be allowed to sit, not to legislate, but to contribute their perspectives, because obviously it is the town council which will end up voting on this ordinance, and it is the RTM that will end up vetoing or accepting, and that's clear from the charter. But the charter doesn't say that the RTM can have no input to a committee that crafts an ordinance. There's no part of the charter that mentions that. And so anyway, thank you for letting me speak, and that will be it. And the other thing I just want to mention is we do have an excellent police force, so I don't really see why we wouldn't want to have a community review board to enhance that and to be fully transparent. So thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, we're going to be going back to second and third time for councilors, but given what Councilor Baumgartner suggested after the motions were made, I just want to throw it out to the council at this point. I have 3 councilors that have expressly said they would like to have the Public Safety Committee reestablished. Is that something that you would prefer to do? That wasn't on the table when Councilor Bordelon made her motion and all the amendments were made. So I want to just ask if that's something that the council wants to do, or should we pursue the motion and the amendments that are on the floor? Would you guys want to give me any kind of indication of where you are with that? If you would like to redo the Public Safety Committee, if you could just raise your hand, please. I'll call off names. I see Zeppieri, Aubry, Baumgartner, Heed, Melendez, Parker, and Granatowski. So there's the majority of us that would like to see the Public Safety Committee reconvened.
Point of clarification.
Councilor Bordelon, you're up next. Just give me 1 second, please.
I just want to say that I couldn't raise my hand on that because I have a question about it first.
Right. I'm going to throw it to you next.
Sorry, that's why my hand wasn't raised though.
Thank you. So at that point, then, we have a consensus that would like to go Councilor Baumgartner's route, which is to reestablish the Public Safety Committee. Having said that, everybody that has a motion on the floor, you will need to decide what you want to do with this, given that the council has a consensus to go a different direction. So Councilor Bordelon, Councilor Franco, and me, I think. Yeah, and me. I am willing to withdraw my motion, but I will go to Councilor Bordelon, Aubry, and Melendez had their hands up next. I just wanted to get that out there so everybody kind of knows where we are with process.
First, I just want to say, asking for any type of committee or standing committee or review board or task force or all that, nowhere does that mean that anyone's questioning the integrity of the police department, nor calling them insufficient or not good enough, nor do I have to sit here and keep praising what they do because I trust that they're doing their job. So that's not, I think there's a misconception sometimes when people say, let's have a process or let's have a review board. When people brought up the plastic ordinance, it didn't mean that certain sections of town weren't following it. We were just trying to establish that we are united in that. And it's the same process here and the same respect needs to be given. When an issue comes up, if I say, I don't think that my son should go back to school because I don't want to put him on the school bus, but I'm not able to give him a ride because I have to be to work at 6:45 in the morning. That doesn't mean that I think the process that the school is doing wrong. I have a problem and I want to make sure that it never happens in the town of Groton. Doesn't mean that Chief Fusaro is going to be here in 10 years to make those decisions. So by bringing this up doesn't mean that we're questioning the integrity of anybody in law enforcement. As I sit here, I was a formal criminal justice major. My fiance works in corrections, and his brother-in-law is a retired state police officer. And we're the strongest fighting ones for a review, okay? And we have loved ones and family in it. So I get tired, and I respectfully say this, and I'm saying this from the heart, not angry, but passionate about what I believe. This is not a process about what our town is doing wrong. I don't need to sit here and keep praising it. I don't have to keep, reiterating, oh my God, we have the best this, we have the best that. I already know that. That's why they were hired, right? I have to stand behind that. What I'm asking for is something with teeth that's going to be long lasting, so nothing in this town doesn't happen. And we can't say that it hasn't happened here because Chief Fusaro hasn't been here. Attorney Dugan hasn't been here the whole time. We don't know that nothing's never happened in this town. To say that is, you know, after standing in Stonington, that process there, so many things went wrong as an example. And once again, I'm speaking freely. I'm not advised or an attorney on this, or I'm speaking from my own opinion as a person. The cops should have waited, got the keys, and never let those people leave the hospital. The process was broken. They didn't get the keys or stand by the car or go into the hospital because they weren't intending to arrest them, in my opinion. So my thing is, a process was broken. I'm sure there's a lot of great police officers on that force, and right now they're looking at that process again. I'm asking that we have a process here, and it's not, and I'm tired of hearing, I don't know why we need this. We have great people. I don't want to undermine their authority. I'm not questioning their authority. I would have never wanted to be a cop or in the law enforcement field. I went into the medical field so I could be home with my children in the evening because I couldn't give the time to be the cop or the correction officer in the facility and work third shift. So I have nothing but respect for law enforcement. That's first. But there's crooked people in every form of government, every form of medical, municipalities, and what people are asking for is reform and accountability in their municipality, and that's what I'm asking for, and I'm not saying there's a problem in this town. So I have to say that as passionately as I can from my heart, as a mother of 2 African-American sons who has to teach them about how they should be arrested and be careful about being profiled in different areas. Those are fears I have that are true, and I can't take that away, and I can't say that you have those feelings, and I don't expect that you do. So by asking for a process, once again, does not state that there's a problem necessarily in this town. So let's take that off the board for us when we talk about that. Let's say that we are looking at a process in which we have a strong review process where we're going to have something that's going to take the situation at hand when a complaint comes through, that it's reviewed in a way that we are doing our best. And Representative Nolan spoke twice at the rally in Stonington, and I won't quote him. I'm going to paraphrase and use my own words because I don't have it written down to quote him, but he said something to the effect of, he supports a process in which there is a review. If you're following good guidance and you're following the law, you're not afraid of it, or you want it. You embrace that because it keeps everybody honest and everybody on the same playing field. And there's nothing that can get through that. And there's a process in which we all should follow. And African Americans have been targeted. With all respect to Councilor Zeppieri, with the numbers of the different races, I don't see the color in that, but I'll tell you, the minority, the Black Lives Matter movement, and for brown, black, and Latino people are feeling targeted, okay? And I have been targeted at times or asked in my own town, walking late at night, why am I walking the streets at midnight? Okay, I grew up here. I should be able to walk at midnight and not look like a suspect. I'm not saying it was anyone in particular in this law enforcement or what town I was particularly in, but what I'm trying to say is it happens. And it's important that we respect the process in which it does happen. So what I'm asking for, again, has nothing to do with disrespect to Chief Fusaro and all of his staffing or any other law enforcement body in the town. It has nothing to do with that. It's no disrespect to Blue Lives or however they identify or whatever. So with that being said, I can support a safety committee if we reestablish one, and it's a standing committee that we vote on tonight to reenact that's not going to get taken away later, in that if their first obligation is to take that safety committee and work with the Groton Long Point and the city police to come up with a process and start to look at that 65-page possible document along with the attorney's recommendations. And we can bring in RTM members from the safety committee. There's, I don't know how many people sit on that committee, but we can invite them in. That's something as a town council we can do, invite them in on that committee to discuss the process in which to get to the bottom of something. I can support a safety committee if we make that our first agenda item today, and I can get a consensus that that's the direction we want to move. With that being said, I do believe, I understand to Councilor, with all due respect to Councilor Franco, we're a 9-member body, but darn it, we were voted in. I may live in the city. Well, I went from District 2 to District 3 for full clarification, but I've lived over on High Street in Mystic as well. I've lived in many different districts in Groton. But with that being said, I feel it's important that all of Groton voted us in as a Groton Town Council. So we do have the right in some to make decisions on this. But I agree that we should bring in a lot of people involved in all areas of the town. And I think that's where the RTM has the most representation, as stated, Republicans, the Democrats, as well as all the districts represented. And I think that's what would be important. So I would like to make a motion to bring back the public safety. I will remove my motion for the original piece, my resolution that I had put forward. And I would like to propose that we—
Councilor Bordelon, hold on one second. So you're withdrawing your original motion, correct?
For now, and maybe it has to come back to safety committee.
Hold on one second, please. And the second on that needs to be withdrawn also. So Councilor Bordelon is withdrawing. The second on that was Councilor Franco. Councilor Franco, would you withdraw your second?
No, I have questions.
Okay, so then the motion cannot be withdrawn if the seconder does not withdraw their motion.
So for clarification, because I'm obviously new to government and I do not agree, I do not state to be perfect at this. This is why I got involved, to learn more about this and represent my community as a minority. What is the process then? Can I throw another motion for the safety committee, or I have to have it removed?
So if I were in your shoes, and we have the motion and all these amendments, you could simply make another motion striking everything else and instead asking for the reinstatement of the Town Council Public Safety Committee.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to strike all other motions that I had made, and I would like to, at this point in time, create a public safety committee that is part of the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to get it. So you want to strike all the other motions to recreate let's just go create the Town Council Public Safety Committee?
Correct.
Okay.
And I would ask that I'll be sending an email to send it also to rules to make sure that it's part of the new rules, that it's a standing committee.
As a standing committee.
Correct. Standing is the key. Yep.
Is there a second for that?
Second, Heed.
Okay, moved by Bordelon, seconded by Heed. I'm just going to repeat it for the public and for the rest of the council so everybody's clear, because there's been a lot of movement tonight. So the third amendment on the floor this evening strikes all the other motions on the floor and instead says create a standing public safety committee, create the Town Council Public Safety Committee as a standing committee. That was moved by Bordelon and seconded by Heed. Councilor Bordelon, did you wish to speak any more to this? If not, I have other councilors who also wish to speak.
Yeah, but I guess I would I agree with what you said, but I guess I want the first order of business to start to work on this issue that we were discussing tonight about looking at, I'm going to say civilian review board, but it may be called something else, but also to start to pick apart that 65-page state process, the attorney's recommendation, and work collaboratively with the RTM Safety Committee as well to have a solid discussion to start looking at how we may want to move forward with something. So, because if that's not going to be the work of the Safety Committee, then I want a resolution to do something other way.
Councilor Aubry, you're next in the queue. All right. So, Councilor Bordelon, are you set?
I think that's it. I think this is a good starting point. I think bringing that back and having that safety committee as a standing committee, I think shows us that that's something that's consistent, that's there, and I think it mirrors what the RTM has, which is another part of our government representation. And I think it's important to have that collaboration, and I think it could be a really strong working group committee. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Councilors Aubry, Melendez, Heed, and Baumgartner in the queue. Lots of talk. Councilor Aubry, you're up.
No, I just wanted to say I felt it was time to stop. This is, I understand her concern. I understand everybody's concern, but this isn't the Portia show. We gotta give each other a turn to speak.
Point of order.
Councilor Aubry, I would ask you to refrain
point of order.
Calling out.
I know. No problem.
Thank you, Councilor Aubry. Did you have something else you wanted to address? If not, we have other councilors who wish to speak.
No, please go forward.
Councilor Melendez is next.
Yeah, I can support like I said before, the Public Safety Committee. I would hope that whoever sits on that would involve the RTM. I agree with what the moderator said. They have minority representation over there. They have people from all parts of town. I think this this is something that can only be accomplished with everyone. So I will be voting in favor of this amendment.
Sorry, Councilor Heed and then Baumgartner.
Yes, I just want to quickly respond to Councilor Franco's concern and acknowledge that it's not incorrect, but I think it's really important that people from all corners of town are represented. I know that the city is talking about potentially including people from the town in their PACT group. So even if it were limited, I think there should be residents from the city and possibly even a city police officer or to participate in some form. I think we should be building a bigger community and coordinating police policies and practices and making sure we've all got good relations and we're all talking to each other. So I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner? You're muted, Councilor Baumgartner.
Yes, just to clarify, so if we were to vote, I didn't realize we were able to reestablish a standing committee. Manager Burt, if we were to approve reestablishing the standing committee on public safety, obviously this vote would then change, or if we were to vote this out of the committee of the whole, it would go before the town council. So this committee would not be established until our next council meeting?
Correct. There would be a resolution at the council meeting, unless you had a special meeting or something beforehand, but.
And it wouldn't require any action taken by the Rules Committee?
May I jump in for a second? I'm looking at 9B and members of the Rules Committee, that would be Councilor Overy and Parker and Baumgartner. 9B says the mayor or council may establish other standing and ad hoc committees as needed. So Rules Committee, can we by a vote here establish that?
So what I think the best action would be to ultimately have when we're voting on the rules, I think by next meeting we should have to you or vote approve our rules rewrite. We're in the last section of it now. We met at 5:30 and we really did I think we've done yeoman's work over the last few months. Myself, I shouldn't start with myself, our esteemed chair, Overy, and Councilor Parker. We've worked together to review those council rules. Many of you have made referrals in the past few months to the committee, and I think we should have something for you very soon. So maybe that's something that our committee, with the vote tonight, to add that to the final language of the rules, that it is a permanent standing committee. But that was my question, even if we require a vote, because I think according to our rules, the mayor can establish the committee on her own, even without us. So my question is, if you were to reestablish that standing committee, say now, could we then vote to take action to refer this item of establishing a civilian review board to that standing committee?
So while we have Attorney Duggan here, if you don't mind, please, the charter, you've seen our rules. I would like the council to vote tonight. I would like a vote on record saying, yes, we want to reestablish that committee. If the council would vote here in committee of the whole to reestablish that committee, can it just simply be created? Or do we have to process this in some other way?
I think as the town manager stated, it would go through the typical process of voting on it here and then having a resolution with the council.
Okay, Councilor Baumgartner, does that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. And I would add, in terms of that committee's mandate, what issues they would deliberate on, I think it's reasonable to assume they would deliberate on any policing policy reform, but including but not limited to the civilian review board reviewing that item.
I would agree. And the other thing I would want, once we vote on these things this evening, and assuming that the consensus of the council is to move this, I would ask for you to send me an email in writing saying if you would like to serve on that committee, please. So I will ask for that next. So we have in the queue, Franco, Zeppieri, Bordelon, and Heed.
So first I have questions about motions on the floor. How many motions are on the floor?
We have the main motion. We have 3 amendments. We will vote them in reverse order. So the 3rd amendment would be voted first.
Can one councilor make more than one motion?
Yes.
Okay. So if we were to establish the safety committee, do we have to go back to the original startup rules that were in place that when it first began? And what, how many members, who's on it, what are they choosing to do, what is their goals and requirements, and who they report to, things of that nature?
No, because it's a whole new committee. It's just going to be a public safety standing committee, so the council can decide what they would like to do with it.
Oh, so we're not reestablishing.
We are establishing a town council. We are creating a public safety committee as a standing committee, public safety committee of the town council.
All right, because many people have said reestablish. So this is where there's wording issues here. And I would like to go back to the, so I understand what some of the councilors are saying. Oh, well, the city might invite people from the town, or the city might invite this or that, or they may do that. The city is responsible for the city police department, and the town is responsible for the town department. These are I don't know how else clearly I could say. I can't go down to Groton Long Point and say, hey, I'd like to get on one of your committees or boards and make decisions for Groton Long Point just as a resident from Mystic. I mean, so that's what I'm saying. Residents from Groton Long Point should be making decisions for the town. Residents from the city should be making decisions for the town police. They all areas of town have their own police department. So I understand what you're saying. And as Moderator Simmons had said, well, my kids go to school there, or I pay taxes. I understand that, but you are serviced by your police department in your area of town. I get it. I mean, you may not like it, but I can't go over to the city and join a committee and say, I'd like to start making decisions and recommendations for what you should do over here. It's not how, I just don't think that's right. And so for having residents of all areas of town make decisions for the town police, even though they don't get the service, I don't understand that. That's why I'm trying to say, I think it should be town residents, town who are serviced and live in their jurisdiction, that they are impacted by. So that's another question, is how many people are you going to have on this committee? I mean, it just sounds similar to what was originally stated. I mean, you could have as many as you want. You can have the RTM on it. You can have, the police department people on it. You can have all these people. So, I mean, I don't understand, other than we're just simply choosing to call it something else now. I mean, so you want to get into the meat and potatoes of it. Who's going to be on this committee? What is their goals? What's their mission? And these are things that have to be decided before anybody votes to just establish a safety committee. Thank you.
I just want to correct some misconceptions. We're talking about creating a committee of town councilors. So it would be town councilors serving on the committee. We have Councilor Zeppieri, Bordelon, and Heed in the queue. Councilor Zeppieri, you have the floor.
Just briefly, I want to go back to one of the prior councilors who was saying we need not say how excellent our police force is. We expect them to be excellent. I think we need to say how excellent our police force is. We have a lot of officers who go out every day and put themselves on the line to protect us, to serve us. And we ought to be unified as a council to express how much we appreciate them. I think that there's a lot of unrest in people in law enforcement, in some communities, officers are not getting out of patrol cars, but not for fear that they're going to get shot, but for fear that some committee of government will pull the rug out from beneath them. I should think that we would want our police officers to know that we're 100% behind them, and we appreciate what they do, and we're looking forward for continued excellence. And I think that should be a council affirmation. I would appreciate a show of hands of people who agree with that.
Thank you, Councilor Zeppieri. I just want to remind the council that we have already demonstrated by show of hands that we have a consensus to create a town council public safety committee. So that is the consensus. So unless people have changed their minds, when this comes to a vote, that is going to be what happens. So we have other councilors who wish to speak, but I just want everybody to keep that in mind. You have the votes to get the Town Council Public Safety Committee created. Councilor Bordelon and then Heed.
Thank you. For full clarification again, and I'll leave it alone, I wasn't saying we shouldn't praise them. I'm just simply saying that on a night when we're trying to look for what people in our country are asking for is transparency, accountability, and the praising of the police department tonight, that's not to take away that credit. The praise is already there, and it does come from my family, and it was why I wanted to be a cop. So they have my full support. But anyway, what I also want to ask is, when would it be appropriate then to ask for a special meeting? Speaking of this, I think that this safety standing committee shows that we support our police department. It's a committee that can work with them. We can do our due diligence in looking at different ways to collaborate with the RTM and inviting other speakers in to find ways to have a strong sound system for our town. So when would it be appropriate to make a motion to also say that, with all going on in this country and everything right now in the civil unrest, to show that this town is willing to support people in this community, I think it's important to call a special meeting. I don't think we should wait until Tuesday to form the safety committee, and I think we should act now on that. So I'm looking for clarification on when would it be appropriate to call that.
Okay, so first things first. First, we have to have a vote on the third amendment. Once that passes, at that point, I will ask, let me backtrack. Assuming that it passes, which I assume it will because we've had a show of hands indicating support. Assuming that the motion to create the Town Council Public Safety Committee passes, at that point, I will ask for consensus to hold a special meeting. And at that point, Councilor Bordelon, then we can know whether the rest of the council is with you.
Thank you.
Is that your question?
Thank you. Yep.
You're welcome. Councilor Heed.
Yeah, I'd like to actually step away from this a little bit and go back to the original, the legal opinion that we received. There was a point in here that I didn't quite understand, saying that we couldn't do something unless we had a charter revision. So my question is, what exactly is in the charter that complicates proceeding?
There's nothing that prevents us from creating a public safety committee. So I can answer that one. Attorney Duggan would have to take, there's quite a bit that we can't do as per the charter. But I'm not sure if Attorney Duggan wished to speak to certain things that were precluded. I would just say at this point, that is going to be for the Public Safety Committee if it is voted in. That's something that I think the conversation should be had in that small group. And then you could go into great detail as to what you want to do, and Attorney Duggan could tell you what you can do and what you can't do. I'm not sure if you want to briefly touch on it right now, Attorney Duggan, but those are conversations that I think I agree with Councilor Baumgartner, Councilor Bordelon, Councilor Heed, who also seconded the motion, that these in-depth conversations could be explored by the Public Safety Committee.
Sure, and just very briefly, in the opinion, we discussed whether or not the town could form a police commission absent a charter revision. And the answer to that question was no. the police commission, as set forth in the statutes, does involve the direct management and oversight of a police department. That conflicts with our charter, which vests the management and oversight of the police department first in the town manager, and then through the town manager down to the chief. So when you look at those things in conjunction, what allows an entity to actually have civilian oversight right now is a formal police commission. And we don't have the ability to create that commission without going through a charter revision.
Okay, just a follow-on question then. In the draft legislation that's before the state, that's something that would be putting together basically a police commission, but it's not a town level police commission, is that right?
Well, in the draft legislation talks about a civilian review board, but it doesn't identify what the powers of that review board are. It references that municipalities could adopt them, but it doesn't go into nearly enough depth and facts for us to be able really to opine on it, because in my opinion, the way that's drafted right now, that actually sort of conflicts with the other statute that governs police commissions and talks about what police commissions do. So I think I'm trying not to jump too far ahead with that one, just recognizing that, okay, they've got this 2-paragraph placeholder in a 63-page document, and we'll just have to wait and see how they flesh it out.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so anyways, any discussion on whether or not we need to look at different things in our charter would be totally premature at this point, because if the state changes it, there's nothing, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna take a turn here in the queue. I think given the circumstances we're in, especially that we have a majority of us on this council that are in favor of establishing the Public Safety Committee, the fact that the General Assembly is working on a rather lengthy document, which we don't know when it's going to be done, we don't know what's going to be in it. I think that establishing that Council Public Safety Committee would be the best way to go, because we would have something in place ready to act on whatever the General Assembly did. You could be exploring issues, you could be hearing from other members of the community, and you will be ready to go. We are in a different time than we were when we chose to eliminate the Public Safety Committee originally. We are in a very different time now, and there is a need for it now. And I think that's why so many of us, the majority of us, are in favor of reestablishing or of creating that committee. We want to create a Public Safety Committee of town council members. I think it's the best way to go. And I think all the questions that we have would be best funneled through that committee. We can't move the question, but I understand that there are a majority of you who want to go ahead with this. So I would ask you, we have Councilor Baumgartner and Bordelon in the queue, keep that in mind, that people are supportive of your ideas, and we can vote on this whenever people are ready to move ahead. And we have a majority ready to do so. Councilor Baumgartner and Bordelon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I agree with you, and I'm so happy to hear that there is consensus. I think this is just the beginning of a long discussion and long-term discussion about how we can strengthen accountability and transparency in, police and civilian encounters. And I again would just like to thank our police chief for participating in this very lengthy meeting, and I hope, as he's indicated in the past, where he has an open door, record, if you'd like to discuss with him about issues affecting, impacting policing, he's made it very clear, abundantly clear, that he will always come to the table to have that discussion. So we appreciate him and his leadership for that. But I do hope that, the committee will yield opportunities for better understanding between the community and the police department, reviewing data and having maybe a bit more of an in-depth discussion, and less rushed, and about how we can improve relations between the community and the police department in that venue, as opposed to a council meeting where we're focused on everything ranging from policing issues to playgrounds and playscapes. So just oftentimes, again, we get bogged down in so many other issues. So it's good to give the attention these issues deserve. My last question of the night for Eileen, because I know, we hopefully, with a meeting with just one thing on the agenda, it'd be nice to go home early. But if this committee were to establish a civilian review board with knowing that in a civilian review board that also functioned as an administrative body, which isn't legally permissible by our town charter. Under existing conditions, if we were to vote if the council were to authorize a civilian review board, what rights would that committee have that would be different than a civilian review board with teeth? And how would you distinguish a civilian review board from simply an advisory board?
Well, I think that's really the key issue that you've hit on. Right now, the only thing that the town can create, no matter what it calls it, civilian review board, whatever, is an advisory body. Something beyond that, something that gets involved in the specific management of the department, significant oversight of the department, that conflicts with what our charter provides with regard to management. I think I mentioned earlier. Again, it's the town manager that has oversight of departments that's specifically spelled out, then it flows down into the chief. The distinction is, really the distinction for that is a police commission where there is civilian, oversight and control over a department. When you look at that statute, it's very broad, and what the powers are, the powers of management and oversight. And those are really the two, kind of polar opposite items. And that's really where you are. You can have the advisory board, or you can go through a process where you go through charter revision, and develop a police commission. But I think, again, and I know many people have said this already, that given the fact that we have this pending legislation out there that covers many, many, many different topics, and in my mind, it spent only 2 paragraphs of that huge document to just reference a civilian review board. There's got to be more. We need to have more. And maybe when that's fleshed out, we'll be talking a little bit differently about it.
In that proposed legislation, I tried going on during the meeting, and the link isn't working any longer on the CGA website. But did the legislation propose that every municipality have a civilian review board with subpoena powers, which is obviously, that you could have civilian review without them, but then they're calling where they were also. Right.
So that's not what the proposed legislation provides. It provides that this legislative body of a town may establish a civilian review board. And then it talks about various things that the board, by ordinance, the ordinance shall prescribe the number and members of the review board, the method of selection of the review board, the terms of office. It doesn't even tell us what the authority or role is, other than to say, okay, they can issue subpoenas to compel the attendance of witnesses before the review board. Honestly, if you said that to me right now, that we were going to compel witnesses, we'd have a huge issue. It'd be a huge clash with this, for example, the civilian complaint process, which tells us how we have to go about things. It would be a huge clash with what we can do in terms of our employees and labor relations issues. So I think I really view this as a placeholder. Yeah. That's a placeholder for them to figure out what they want it to be. This is the beginning, far from the end in my mind. So it's hard to really comment a lot on this because it's just so vague.
And the last thing, so how would that proposed legislation impact the 4 existing municipalities within the state that have civilian review boards?
Again, it's really hard to say because the existing civilian review boards, I think you could call something anything you want. If these civilian review boards that exist, they're advisory in nature, they could certainly retain that power. Nothing even in this draft legislation is saying that you have to adopt this. it's suggesting that municipalities might have some other role, some other road for civilian oversight other than the police commission, which is a very carefully defined process in the statutes. So I'm sorry that I'm repeating myself, but it's just really too early, I think, to look at this and for us to draw things out so that even I could say to you, oh, this is what you could do. This is what you might do. Right now, you have the ability to create something that's advisory in nature.
Well, it's important to have these in-depth discussions, but I know this will be the first of many, as I stated earlier. So no further questions. So thank you so much, Eileen, for your research on this. Much appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you. I would ask the council to please confine your comments and questions to the amendment that's on the floor, which is to create the Town Council Public Safety Committee. That's what we will be voting first, please. And again, we have consensus to do that. So I'm hoping that councilors can let us make some progress here. Councilor Bordelon, you have the floor, and then Councilor Franco. And then
I see the chief came a bit more prepared than we did. He has a crisp copy of the draft language.
Okay, Councilor Bordelon, Franco, and Aubry.
Thanks. I just wanted to double clarify that it's going to be a standing committee, correct? That's the goal?
Yes, that was the motion that you made.
I just want to make sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Franco, and then Aubry.
Councilor Franco, you're muted.
So in the past, anytime we've created a committee of any sort, it comes to us with all the, the goals, the number of members. I mean, are we having all the councilor members on this committee or a select few? Nobody? Okay. I'm just wondering, because these are things we haven't discussed, or are we going to allow the committee to decide how many members they have and what their goals are and how they're going to go forward? And I mean, will a safety committee include all EMS? And why are we selecting this whole committee to be councilors? If that's the case, we can just do whatever we're doing at the council meetings and just have a separate line item. And actually, if you think about it, we're going to have councilors go on and have their own committee and then come back, make recommendations and vote on their own recommendations. And if we're going to have like 6 councilors on this committee, you might as well just, I don't know why we're having a committee. I mean, so my thought is, before we create a committee, I think we should have all of the ducks in a row of what it's all about and all the details before we just vote on something. So it's very easy to say, hey, we want to have a safety committee, but then are we going to let the safety committee figure it all out and then make their own rules and their own guidelines? And who is going to appoint these people and how are they going to get appointed? Is it mayor appointed? I mean, I don't know. So I think this is awfully quick then. So without any answers. I mean, I haven't heard any of this type of discussion, and usually we have it in writing. Thank you.
We have Councilor Aubry and then Heed.
I think what we're doing is just saying that this is what we'd like to have. It's the mayor's responsibility at this point, if I'm reading my rules correctly, to appoint a beginning committee that will formulate goals, will formulate a recommendation for who would be on the council. Let me finish, Rachel, before you're shaking your head no. It says here that the mayor can appoint people to an ad hoc committee or a committee or et cetera. So that's what we're asking her to do. Then the committee, under the guidance of the council, can decide what is the goal, where are we trying to get to, what are we trying to, who should we bring into this? There is a lot. Last time when we had that committee, I think there were 2 people on it. So at least we're opening it up to a bigger pool of people to become part of it. There's people that have already offered to put their time into it, people very capable. So
It's only going to be counselors.
I beg your pardon?
It was stated it will only be counselors.
Councilor Franco. Councilor Aubrey has the floor, please.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. We don't have any rules yet. So to say it was stated it was just the council, I don't think that that is absolutely in stone. The mayor will appoint some people to begin this. It doesn't mean it has to be the council. It has to come to council for approval when they have some body to it. So we're just beginning the process. And, you know, and the other thing I'd like to say is I try to understand what somebody's saying when they're saying it, and I'm really trying to understand, you know, a philosophy of not having people from the city, you know, but when it comes to things like this, we were elected by the whole town. And in a way, we represent the whole town. No, we can't go to the city and tell them how to run their police force or the Groton Long Point, but we can create a standard. And I think from there, others can grow. So I think it's better to be a little bit more in a wish to keep things together, not divided. So I think if we just take this step forward, we begin, let a certain amount of people be appointed to establish the rules, the goals, and et cetera for the committee. That's where I think it should go. Because it says here, I don't want to elongate this, and I apologize this.
Right.
The mayor shall appoint members of the council to such committees as shall be designated and shall designate the chairman of each. Doesn't say everybody.
Councilor
Thank
Heath,
you. That's all I have.
And then I am in the queue as well. Councilor
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought the mayor would answer the question. So, but you know, I've got my name in the queue before she does, so I will answer for her. The committees are usually set up as 3 people, and it's an odd number of people. And the recommendation to have it be 3 when you have a council of 9 is from, is his name Tom Hennig? I always forget. He's the gentleman we discuss FOIA rules, and he always says, you know, if you're a counselor, most people you want in a room at any time is going to be 3. Don't get it to be 4. You know, make sure that you're not talking town business, all that kind of stuff, unless you're in an official capacity. So that would be the number that I would recommend for this committee to be. But it could be, because our rules say 5 is a quorum, it could be up to 4. But, you know, just to be on the safe side, you would want to make this 3. As far as what it does, the council gives it direction. We make referrals to it, just like you would to personnel and appointments or to rules. But it's actual, you know, the actual goals we could actually set forth. I believe Councilor Bordelon was trying to do that when she made her initial call for this to be set up. But we would, I think, you know, if you establish it, then you decide what you wanted to do specifically. Give it a couple of things and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. My turn. Once again, we are a committee or a council of 9, and how things get done in the council is by majority. And we have had expressed a majority that wishes to create a town council public safety committee. There's a majority that wish to do that. Councilor Franco.
I'm well aware there's a majority that would like to do that. My question is, what are the guidelines going to be? And they're supposed to be established by the council. You don't usually let a committee establish their own guidelines. And everything that's usually come before us, it's in writing. We usually go through it and we pick it out and we debate it line by line of what we like and what we don't like. And so this just seems like we're just very quickly, without thorough thought, creating something like, I mean, everybody's I've heard it's going to be counselors. I've heard it's going to be counselors and other people appointed by the mayor. Then I hear maybe we should have 3 people. We haven't gone through every step to say, how are we creating this committee? And you usually don't say, all right, we're going to create a committee, start throwing some people on it, and we'll create the guidelines later. So I'm saying, I understand there is a consensus to go forward with this. I've heard it. I mean, I hear it. But my point being is, you're putting the cart before the horse is what I'm thinking. I mean, we haven't done anything here and made any decisions on how this is going to work. I mean, like I said, is it going to be all EMS? I have no idea. So you can go with a consensus without having all your details and without knowing what you're really voting on. And if you'd like, go forward with that. And I won't. Thank you.
Councilor Parker?
This may be off topic, but I'm going to put it out there anyways. When we established the beautification committee, did we already have the goals set up for it?
Yes, you did. It was all in writing.
Excuse me. I have the floor. Thank you. So we can establish the public safety committee, and suggestion, hold it until we get the report from the state and then move forward with it. That way we'll have some guidelines, and then they can come up with, we can follow their rules and figure out how to do everything, and then get the citizens involved afterwards. I think we should set up the public safety committee, just put it back on and through the rules that we already have it. And it looks like to not only the state, but to other people that we are working and listening to the public, that they would want this. 2, we can wait until they come out with a report to establish certain rules so that we won't fall, that's not the word I want. We won't be up against what the state wants. And we can always increase our policy for that or rules for that. You can establish the rules from the state and move forward from that. As long as we're trying to show the state and the people that we are paying attention. A lot of people want oversight. A lot of citizens are probably be willing to step up and help with us, but we have to have something in place to say that we are doing something. Thank you.
Attorney Duggan, do you wish to speak?
I did. I just wanted to hopefully clarify something about this committee structure and nature. Just looking at the current council rules, it talks about the mayor or council may establish standing and ad hoc committees as needed. The mayor shall appoint members of the council to such committees. So I believe as Councilor Heed had said, it is members of the council, but also I think for some reference, and maybe Councilor Franco, this will help a little bit. Subparagraph E talks about council business requiring committee action shall be referred to a committee by the mayor at each regular meeting. The point being that whether it's an ad hoc or a standing committee, the committee doesn't simply, I'll say, run off on its own. It takes things, it's a subcommittee of the council and takes referrals from the council. So I don't recall, honestly, if this is how it's the process by which it's been before. You mentioned the beautification committee, but I think these rules are pretty clear that it's a committee of counselors and that the referral comes from the council. So the council is deciding what it needs for this committee to review. So I just wanted to share that as we were going through this.
Thank you. Everyone has spoken, so I'm going to call for a vote on the 3rd amendment, which is to strike all the other motions to create a town council public safety committee as a standing committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand and I will call your name. Keep your hand up until I call your name. All those in favor: Zeppieri, Baumgardner, Melendez, Heed, Aubrey, Bordelon, Parker, Granatowski. All those opposed? Franco, any abstentions? That motion passes 8 in favor, 1 opposed, Franco, 0 abstentions. Thank you. So at this point, Councilor Bordelon had asked when we could meet to formalize this. I would say, I would offer 2 options for the council's purview. The first is the next regular meeting will be the first Tuesday in August. So if you want to not do anything special, then we would meet on the first Tuesday in August. Okay, so that is, let me look at a calendar. I don't know what the date is.
August 4th?
August 4th, okay. We have a cow on the 28th, which sounds funny if you don't know what we're talking about. We had a cow. We have another committee of the whole on the 28th. We could, at that meeting, we could have a special town council meeting first to establish this, and then appoint the members at that point, and then have the regular committee of the whole. That's the second option. The third option is to meet on the 21st for a special council meeting that would be short, and it would be just simply to put this into place. So I see one councilor's hand. So we're really looking at 3 options, guys. And so we need to come up with what we want to do with this as far as when you want to meet in order to formalize it. I will also need emails from you expressing your desire to serve. I would ask everybody to send me an email one way or another saying, yes, you want to serve, no, you don't want to serve. That way I have a response from anybody and no one is excluded. Councilor Zeppieri and then Councilor Bordelon.
I would appreciate putting this on for a vote at the next regular meeting of the town council on August 4th. There is no emergency to have it. I may not be able to be here for the next cow. So and I am interested enough to want to vote on it when it comes up again. So I just ask that you consider doing it in the usual scheduled course of events.
Thank you. So the 28th, are you available on the 28th, Councilor Zeppieri, if we scheduled a town council meeting on that evening?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm,
all right.
I'm going, I talked to you about this.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot all about that. Councilor Bordelon, do you have to express an opinion one way or another on which date you would prefer?
Yeah, I'd like to go for the 21st and move this along. I think it's important for the town. I do think it is urgent. I think racism as a public health issue is a concern. I think there's a lot going on right now, and I think the minority community need a voice, and I think having a safety committee that is a starting point that's referrals can go to and is generated, and it shows that this council takes not only the support of the police department, but the support of the constituents' concerns seriously, and I think it's a starting point, and I'd like to see a special meeting on the 21st. Thank you.
Special town council on the 21st. Councilor Melendez.
Yeah, I just have a question. The second option is the cow on the 28th, right?
Well, we would have, since we're convening on the 28th for the committee of the whole, we could also simply schedule a special town council meeting at which we would adopt this.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Do you have a preference as to which way you would like to go, sir?
I mean, I'm on personal appointments on the 21st anyway, so, and I'm going to be here all 3 days, so it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
Either way.
All right.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have, so we have one that would like on the regular council, one would like a special meeting on the 21st, so we're split. Does anyone else want to offer their support for either the regular council or the special council meeting? Councilor Aubry.
I would think the 28th would be an appropriate time. We're 2 weeks to go, and hopefully Councilor Zeppieri could be with us then.
Okay.
But let's do it all one night.
Okay. All right. So we have one for August 4th, one for a special on the 21st, and one for a special on the 28th. Councilor Heed, your preference, please, sir.
Actually, I'd like a point of clarification with Dr. or Councilor Zeppieri. When are you available? When are you not available? I think it would be nice to have all 9
councilors. I know I'm not available on the 21st. I'm not sure how soon after that I will be available.
All right, so you don't even know if you'd be available on the 28th?
I don't know that I'll be available on the 28th. I'm planning to return to work on August 4th.
All right. I'd like to see it done sooner than later, but maybe we take a gamble and do the I would support the 28th then in the hopes that Dr. Zeppieri is back. All right. Councilor Zeppieri.
So Councilor Heed, you are for special town council on the 28th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we have 2 on that time. Councilor Baumgartner, I'll just go through the list here. What date do you prefer, sir?
I think the 21st was the soonest date. Is that the date that was the soonest?
That's correct, but we won't have a full council at that meeting.
All right. I would still support having that on the agenda if possible, and I understand Joe's concern. I also think it's important to factor in when, how long it'll take to actually get members on the committee. So I understand the mayor, the mayor has to appoint the members, but don't those members also then have to be vetted by the appointments and personnel committee?
No.
So as soon as the mayor makes her appointments, then the committee would be eligible to meet?
Yes.
All right. So in that case, I would support either the 21st or the 28th, but would prefer the 21st.
Okay. Who else? Councilor Franco, do you have a preference on date?
No.
Councilor Parker, do you have a preference on the date?
28th, please.
Did I miss anybody? I would go with the 28th as well, to have the COW and then the special council meeting. I believe the manager can't be with us on the 21st either. So we will be short a counselor and we will be short the town manager. We can certainly start, the sooner I get the names from all of you as to interest, the sooner I can appoint people, and then the sooner you can begin your work. So we have a consensus to have a special town council meeting on July 28th. Mr. Burt, you will be available on that date, correct?
Correct.
Okay, very good. All right, so we are making progress. So then I would ask, please, once again, everybody email me and indicate whether you are interested or you are not interested in serving on that committee. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Zeppieri, seconded by Aubrey. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions. It is 8:54. Thank you all for your work. The people of Groton appreciate that, and be well, everybody.
Good night.